You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to Horror Ramblings. It's a podcast where you get spooky horror movie stuff. I am Christopher Walken talking to you from this podcast. You may wonder, why is Christopher Walken on a horror podcast? Well, I was in the prophecy, so don't forget, I have done horror. But hey, thanks, Christopher Walken. Get the hell out of here. I'm Stephen White, and welcome to Horror Ramblings, joined by the wonderful Lester Blosser. How you doing?
Hello.
I probably could have done so much better. It's morning. Or is it? You don't know when you're listening. So how is everything? You seem exhausted.
Yeah, I feel like I got hit by a freight train for some reason. I'm not sure.
It's one of those days.
The missus was out of town for the last 2 days, and the baby was excited that mommy was home, so the baby didn't want to go to bed like normal. So
we're talking about you, right?
Yes. I wish it was a better reason. Like I wish I could say it was something like I was out all night fighting werewolves in the woods or something crazy, but yeah, no, it's fine. I'm to the point where if the baby don't sleep, I'm like the next day. So
yeah. Well, I mean, to kind of kick things off today, I thought it would be fun to discuss a few little not ideas, but just topics that I wanted to bring up that we've kind of glossed over recently, and then we can get into our big topic.
Yeah.
But for starters, I know we had talked about the Munsters and our I guess we really didn't talk about expectations, but we were just like, gonna give it a shot. And it came out on the 27th of September, which was probably 2 weeks ago for all of you listening. And I gave it, I actually had to dig it up, which that to me kind of felt like Netflix not doing its best to promote it. Yeah. As if they tried to bury it immediately, because normally you get something new and they're just like, hey, look at the new show. Look at our new thing that we have. Do you want to watch it? Look at our new thing. And I didn't see the Munsters anywhere. Even in the just added category, it wasn't in the first few slots.
I real quick, I'm wondering if maybe Netflix was like a little hateful about maybe doing some advertisement for it, because Rob Zombie, normally Netflix movies take forever to get released on like Blu-ray and DVD and everything, if they ever even do.
Yeah. Maybe
they had a little bit of a thing with him where they were like, you can advertise for the movie since you want to release it on Blu-ray. I mean, I don't know, but...
Well, I feel like the Universal the 1440 branch is, kind of like their home video branch, and that's where we've seen like the Tremors films. They come out through that, or a lot of the later ones. But they would also have that Netflix release.
Yeah.
So it was like day and date for both. So if they've got a chip on their shoulder for that, then I don't know what the hell for. But it just seemed odd, that they weren't doing anything to promote it. I actually had to search it to find it. And I've seen a lot of people hating on this movie on the internet. The reviews are they're horrible. Now, do I disagree? I don't necessarily agree. I don't think it's as bad as I think a lot of people are making it out to be.
Yeah.
But there are some elements to the pacing that hurt the film, I feel, and kind of drag it down. And I honestly tried to figure out like what was his motivation with this, because you cannot deny, if you've watched The Munsters and you watch this film adaptation of The Munsters, Rob Zombie loves the show.
Yeah.
It is clear. In fact, I honestly feel like he would have shot this in black and white had he had the chance, and studios are just not going to have that. So instead, he decided, let's just make this wild color palette that just really pops off the screen. And it does. It's a gorgeous film to look at. But it's certain pacing elements, especially at the beginning. It's almost like it picked up right at the end, and you were like, all right, I'm in. And then, it ends, and you're like, oh. So I really hate to say that, because that can lose a lot of people. If they're having to drag through this origin story.
Yeah.
But there were just some moments where I felt like an editor could have just, cut down just a little bit here, a little bit there, and just kind of got the pacing to kind of move along a little bit. Comedy, I don't know if that's necessarily Rob Zombie's strong suit, but I can say with 100% certainty, I laughed at several parts. Like, a good laugh. And I was like, oh, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. So it wasn't just like scoffs or something where you're just like, huh. No, there were some genuine laughs. So, and now, I'm trying not to shit on this movie like everybody else, but I do recognize its flaws.
I've seen mixed reviews of it. I haven't taken the time to watch it yet, but I have seen mixed reviews. I've seen people that are like, yes, I love it, and other people that are like, it was terrible, I hate it. I saw a review that put it perfectly. Somebody said, if you take a step back and you look at it from the aspect of, this is Rob Zombie's love letter to the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is his love letter to the show, because he really loved the show. I think that's how I'm going to go into it, because in all honesty, nobody's ever going to replace the original Munsters series. No. It became so iconic because of the way that it was written, the way that the actors were. So, obviously people going in to it expecting it to be just like the original sitcom, they're going to be let down. And sure. I could see that. And I had seen somewhere Rob Zombie actually wanted to film in black and white, but the studio wouldn't let him.
Sounds about right.
So that kind of makes sense. I'm sure that, people will probably change some settings around when they watch it so that it will be in black and white. I mean, it's you're able to do that. Who knows? Maybe the Blu-ray has an option for it. I don't know that, but
I feel like I've heard that there is an option in which you could watch it in black and white, but don't hold me to that. But I feel like I've heard people mention there is an option. So
yeah.
Well, and that's your bag.
Like I told you on a previous show, I saw the trailer first in color and I was like, I don't know, and then I watched it in black and white, and that made me feel a little bit more connected to it, because I was looking at it from the aspect of the original series and everything.
Yeah.
I've heard in a lot of the reviews, one of the strongest things in the film is the gentleman that they picked to play Grandpa Munster was spot on. I did hear that.
Daniel Roebuck is like a great character actor. You've probably seen him in a lot of things. And yeah, he spot on nails the Al Lewis-ness of it all. I mean, obviously he's not going too hammy, because, Al Lewis, he's like, oh my gosh, Hammond, he's just talking. Yeah. He's doing this thing. I sounded more like Richard Kind. And, he embodies a lot of what Al Lewis brought to it, but puts kind of his own spin on it, but it's so perfect. Yeah. And it's so right on. And a lot of the laughs I got was from him.
And see, that's what I had been seeing everywhere. And if he is as good as what everybody's been saying he is in it, as bad as it sounds, Grandpa Munster was my favorite character in the Munsters. I loved all the Munsters, but Grandpa Munster was my favorite.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go into it. I'm going to watch it, see what it's like. You know, I told you, you know, I was going to watch the new Hocus Pocus, but I have to wait for my kid to get home. There's already like 2 things about the new Hocus Pocus that I kind of don't like. They've already sort of in the film set up they sort of set up a sequel already, so there's, you know, going to be rumors now of a third.
Mm-hmm.
And they did sort of turn it into a musical. The witches sing more than once in it.
Okay.
I do know when they like get woken, like when they come back for the first time, I think they have a song that they sing. Not a big deal. I mean, to me, when I was a kid and Hocus Pocus would come on and we'd watch the movie and it, you know, the first scene would come on where they would, you know, get up on the stage and they'd start singing. Like, I'd be dancing on the couch, you know. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I think adding too much music might take away from it a little bit.
Sure.
I did hear, though, that for all of the problems with the story, which it's funny that you mentioned pacing, because I guess that's part of the problem with the new Hocus Pocus, the pacing. One thing that I've heard, I've tried to look at some reviews that are spoiler-free. One of the things that came out in all of the reviews that I looked at was that even after all these years, the 3 witches are still great together. They're still fantastic together. And let's be honest, that's a big part of it. You know, they have to be able to work well together, otherwise the movie doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I if they do a third one, I hope that they're able to bring back the original kids to maybe, you know, help some new kids take the witches down again or whatever. I hope they figure that out, just for the simple fact that I think all of them wanted to come back, but I think there was like, they all had scheduling conflicts and everything.
Right.
I didn't realize the girl that played Marnie, the cute little girl in that movie, I didn't realize that she was in The Walking Dead. I did not realize that at all. She was in one of the later seasons. She was one of they're called like the Whisperers or whatever. They wear masks and they walk with the zombies and everything. Yeah, I didn't know that. I was scrolling on social media and it popped up and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
I checked out of The Walking Dead, so around the time the Whisperer showed up, because I was just drag it out, you know.
Yeah, after they killed. I was mad when Dale died. I was mad when Herschel died. And then they killed Abraham and they killed Glenn. I watched a little bit further on after that, and then I was like, you know, I think I'm done for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just but yeah,
Comments were always solid, so I'll just say that.
I do need to watch the Munsters, though. It's on my list. I'll probably just do a movie night and watch, you know, cheesy movies and and some Disney movies and some, you know, like the Munsters and all that. I'll probably just put it all into one night. I did want to bring something up real quick that I texted you about the other day.
Okay.
The Halloween Ends film. We kind of talked about how they're going with a different approach. There's rumors going around that Michael is going to have an accomplice. And I guess there's an interview out there where the director even mentions that. And in the trailer for it, Laurie's arguing with a kid. I can't think of what his name is off the top of my head. And I think he's referring to her granddaughter. And he says that if he can't have her, nobody can.
I don't know if I saw that one, unless that was in that main trailer, and
it might be. It might be, or it might be in like a little like clip that they, you know, released out to the public. But somebody made a good point. I had seen it somewhere. They said, you know, what if Laurie talking about Michael transcending means more than what people think? What if she's right? What if Michael does transcend? What if his evil is contagious in a sense, and that's how they close out Michael's story? Because there's a scene in the trailer where the the kid is going into this like tunnel. It's like a drainage tunnel or whatever.
Yeah.
And Michael's been hiding like under the city for the last 4 years because they do the time jump. And I guess Michael grabs the kid and he's choking him, and the kid looks into Michael's eyes, and supposedly, you know, he stares into those black eyes, the blackest eyes that anybody's ever seen, and it basically makes him, you know, become evil, like Michael. And even Laurie says, you know, something feels different about it this time. Something's different. Something's changed. Maybe that's the fact that there's another killer. Maybe there's 2 Michael Myers. I don't know if that's what they're doing.
Well, I feel like that's spoiler territory, though. I mean, that could have been part of the thing that they were trying to keep secret. But, I mean, if the director has said something about it, then I guess it's not much of a secret. Because to me, I kind of feel like you're getting into really, really dangerous territory that's going to piss a lot of people off. Because if you do a bait and switch at the end, I mean, come on, we want to see that final showdown. And if it's not him, I don't know.
My thing is what if they're setting it up? What if Laurie and Michael, you know, kill each other? What if they actually do kill each other? And it is it is the original Michael Myers. But what if this accomplice then goes like after her granddaughter or something of that nature? What if they're trying to replace Laurie and Michael? I mean, even if they don't kill Laurie off, if Laurie succeeds in killing Michael once and for all, who's to say that there's not another, you know, I don't want to call them Michael Myers, but what if there does, you know, end up being
another shape? Yeah,
another shape in the series. Thank you. I still think that's going to piss a lot of people off. Because to me, I instantly thought of, as bad as it sounds, I instantly thought of Jason Goes to Hell.
Yeah.
You know, he spreads to other people for a limited time.
Mm-hmm.
What if Michael does something kind of like that? What if the thing that has made Michael so evil is this almost, I don't want to say possession, but in a sense,
yeah,
this evil has just found its way into him, and he spreads that evil out. I mean, again, that's going to piss a lot of people off.
You could honestly try, I mean, if you're going that supernatural route, then why not go back to the curse? You know, use the Cult of Thorn, the whole druid aspect, you know, weave it in.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already going this route.
Yeah, it's possible to do. And, you know, as bad as it sounds, whenever anything ends, there's always people that are going to be pissed off. And they understand that they can't just keep doing the same story over and over and over and over and over again. It eventually gets old, and, you know, everybody's like, yes, the movies are still good, but nothing new is happening. She kills him, and then, you know, she didn't really kill him. He's back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this film series has its haters, and that's fine. I mean, it's like the choose your own adventure stories. We've talked about that, you know. Yeah. Take whatever path you want, whatever story you want to follow, go for it. And
well, I even think they're doing that now with, I think there's an animated Star Wars series coming out where they're exploring some stories of what may have happened if things would have gone differently. I believe.
Yeah. I think I know which one you're talking about. So
I mean, it's a fun aspect to explore. Like, there's fans out there that really do wonder, you know, what if certain characters in things didn't die? What if the bad guy had won, you know, in this instant?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many different what if stories. And that's, you know, that's what I look at with this new Halloween series. It's sort of a what if, you know, sort of thing.
And I honestly feel like this one is more warranted, considering John Carpenter has stated he really wished he hadn't made Laurie Michael's sister.
Yeah.
So that's a writer regret that he did, because he was just thinking on the fly and he was like, this sounds good, whatever. And then he regretted it. So now this is like, okay, well, now we get to do it a different way.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that someone other than the creator has not stated, or you know, some pompous fucking director just showed up and be like, well, this is what I think should have happened. No, this is the creator's vision in some aspect that he's actually been kind of involved in. So I think that's kind of neat.
Now, do you have anything else before we get into the subject? Because I have to say one more thing if you don't.
I've got one other detail that kind of piggybacks off of our topic last week. A recommendation that I don't think we've talked about.
Well, I'll let you go first because the thing that I want to talk about is going to take just a second, and
okay.
it refers to what happened last night. So,
okay.
Go ahead. You do what you're doing.
So last week we talked about, biggest what the fuck moments in horror. Mm-hmm. And last night, boy, I was reminded of one that probably would have been on my list.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, because it took me a minute, and I remember watching this movie, and I had a moment. And it's, oh, God. But if you're not watching Shudder's 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments, go do it right now. They're up to number 50 in the lineup. By the time this comes out, there'll probably be another, I don't know how many they're doing. It's about 15, I think, per, maybe more. Point being, go check out the newest episodes that are out. I think 50 is up to where I watched at the time of recording. But last night, they've shown a lot of awesome movies. There are a lot of movies, and I'm assuming that if one movie has already shown up on the list, not to say that others couldn't,
yeah,
or maybe subsequent sequels, but I feel like it's definitive to like the franchise. You know what I mean? Like number 51, for example, just to kind of give you an example, was the reveal of Frankenstein.
Okay.
Or Frankenstein's monster. It's that whole that seemed to be like the big selling point for it, and talking about how terrifying that might have been to audiences, back in the 30s, and how that just the iconic look of it and what that set the stage for going forward. Mm-hmm. You don't have Freddy, Michael, Jason without that recognizable visage of the monster. Mm-hmm. So to that effect, and that's obviously questionable to the watcher, whether or not that's terrifying. That's where you got to get in your head. Now, I don't see how this could technically be considered a scary moment, because this was more of a, oh my God, what the fuck? And again, would have been on my list had I remembered this. Gerald's Game. Adaptation by Mike Flanagan. Netflix. If you don't know what this movie's about, in a nutshell, it's about this middle-aged couple. They're trying to spice up, their marriage. They go out to this remote cabin. Gerald, the husband, decides to get kinky, handcuffs his wife to the bed, and then he has a heart attack, and now she's stuck. So how do you get out of that? Well, after day number 3, and if you don't want to know this, you can skip ahead just a minute or so, she has to deglove herself. Just saying it gets me all squirmy. Okay? Gets me all squirmy just thinking about it. And they don't show every little detail. They don't stay on that aspect completely, but they do show it happening, and it's just like,
yeah.
God. And I remember having a visceral reaction to it when I saw it the first time. I was like, holy shit. There's just something about it, Like, I've seen some pretty graphic, gory stuff, but there's just something about, like, little meticulous details like that. It's just like, Jesus, I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
And it's so...
I forgot about that. It kind of puts you in the mind, like, now that you've said that, it kind of gives me the Misery vibe when she hobbles him.
That was on the list.
You don't expect it to happen. And when I first watched Gerald's Game, which, God, I'm surprised I didn't think about that. When I first watched it, I thought she was going to use her blood to kind of see if she could slide her hand through, because you can, people can dislocate their thumb and they can get out of handcuffs. Don't ask me how I know that. I've never been arrested, but don't ask me how I know that.
Movies, they show us everything.
But yeah, as soon as the skin started coming off, I was like, what the fuck?
Nope.
But yeah, oh God.
Yeah, I don't want to think about it.
So speaking of the what the fuck moments real quick, I have to bring this up just because it's hilarious. My wife's a busy lady, okay? My wife's a prosecutor. She's a busy lady.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't get to listen to the show. She listens to snippets of the show. We talked about Little Shop of Horrors on a show and how in the film there's a happy ending. The plants don't win in the movie. They had filmed that ending. The audiences didn't like it, so they went with the happy ending.
Yeah.
Well, my wife went on a business trip, and she went to see Little Shop of Horrors, the musical, in a playhouse. And they didn't do the happy ending. They did the ending where the plants win. My wife has never seen the movie.
Okay.
None of the people that she was with have seen the movie. And I explained to her that in the ending in the movie, it's happy. And you'd have thought I told her the biggest lie in the world. She did not believe me at all. She was like, you're not being serious. You're kidding me. And we're talking. We get home because we had been driving from somewhere. She texted Steven. She's like, I'm going to ask Steven because Steven would know too. And we ended up calling you at, I think it was like 9 o'clock here, maybe close to 10.
Yeah.
And yeah, Steven and his wife, Katrina, they both told her the same thing I told her, and she felt lied to at the playhouse.
But she wasn't.
It's those what if stories. That's what we'll consider it.
Yeah.
But I thought it was hilarious that I had to bring it up real quick. I told her that I was going to bring it up on the show. So, but speaking of all these fun movie moments and everything, we are going to talk about a film series that I am very familiar with.
Hmm.
It is up there with the film series that I love, but I wholeheartedly believe that it is a series that you love way more than I do. I do believe that.
Yeah,
I have nothing against it. I love it as a series. I think it's one of those series that really you gravitated toward, and yeah. I think it has to do with us talking about you watching one of the films with some friends when you were being babysat back in the day.
Yeah.
But you made a good point about it. We didn't bring it up on the show, but you did make a good point about it off recording.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that today. So if you want to kind of explain it, I'll kind of let you get into it, and we'll go from there.
All right. So if you don't know what he's talking about, we're talking about Friday the 13th. And he is absolutely right. It's one of my favorite film franchises. I can't explain why. It's just the one that I gravitated towards. People like Michael Myers, people like Freddy, people like Leatherface. I love Leatherface, but he only has 2 good movies amongst his choice movies. Of course, that's my opinion. 3 maybe. 4, 5, I don't know. He's got a few, but not as many as the rest. Like, I can watch all of Friday the 13th, despite their flaws, and I enjoy it. I always enjoy it. I have fun with it. And I'm always trying to deconstruct it in some way, trying to understand what they did. Now, the idea that I wanted to talk about, and I guess we can kind of explore the series as a whole in some ways. So it's more of a further examination, but I'm examining a certain element that I just kind of thought of. With each film, in my opinion, each film is known for something very, very specific that defined a moment within the genre. Now, say, for example, with Halloween, I'm sure you can do some sort of, pointing to that and say, oh, yeah, well, the first one's the first one. The second one is where we find out that that's his sister. The third one had nothing to do with Michael Myers, so it doesn't count. Fourth one, well, we got his niece. And 5, yeah. And then 6, that's the one that had 2 cuts. And then 7, they erased everything. See where I'm going with this? 8, Busta Rhymes. But they don't feel like they meant something to the franchise. Whereas here, I feel I can take the singular moment within each film, like what it's known for, what defines it, and it feels like, oh yeah, that's the big one. You know, it's a iconic moment for the franchise. Now, I could be projecting, I could be overthinking it. So this is where we're going to kind of get into this and what I wanted to talk about. So, I guess we'll just start from the beginning, and then we'll go through, and then Les, if you want to stop me for anything, please do.
I'm
Questions
still thinking
abound.
of Busta Rhymes, so.
Oh yeah,
we all do. Laughing about.
We all do.
Oh.
So with the original Friday the 13th, we're talking about a film that was trying to rip off Halloween. I mean, it's a fact. It's known that Sean Cunningham was looking for a quick, easy way to make a buck because they were trying to just keep a production afloat, because I think something was on the back burner, and they kind of needed something to kind of keep going. They're just like, just do a horror film. It's cheap. It's easy. Whatever. It'll keep the lights on for now.
Yeah.
And obviously he and Victor Miller came up with a very simple script. He practically told him, rip off Halloween. That's popular right now. Just do that, but summer camp. Boom. There we go. And he did, to a point. And I kind of feel like he put his own spin on things, but it is very bare bones when you kind of compare it to Halloween. It's just like, okay, well, someone's killing camp counselors, and then you get Tom Savini in, and it's like, okay, well, what graphic ways can we do it? And that's what I feel like set it apart, was bringing in Savini, making the creative kills, and just doing some wild stuff and seeing what you can get away with. So that helped it stand apart. And then we get the reveal of Pamela Voorhees, which I still feel like you could have just planted her early in the film somewhere. Yeah. Because her just showing up out of the blue was like, who are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, even to this day, when I see her come in, like right there toward the end of the movie, you're like, huh? And like they pump all of her story just so quickly. Like, she explains herself.
Yeah.
So very quickly. And as weird as it sounds, it's extremely off-putting. Mm. Like, it's not even in a creepy way. It's really off-putting. Like, when you see her talk about everything, you're like, okay, what? And like, it's not a bad thing by any means. I love that they did that.
Yeah.
And I love that movies make jokes about that, even in the first Scream, when the killer's asking her who's the killer in Friday the 13th, and she goes, Jason. No, it was Jason's mom in the first one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, really off-putting. I agree with you. I think they should have, even just a little nod, maybe. Like, the kids stop at a gas station and she's there, or something small. Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, there was even the whole diner scene at the beginning. She could have been in there. You could have seen her talking to people, maybe not make a big deal out of it, make her seem like a secondary character, but people were like, oh yeah, kind of show like she's this friendly person, the person you wouldn't expect. And then when she shows up, you're like, oh shit. So it makes sense. Especially when Mr. Christie is walking out in the rain, and he looks and he's like, oh, it's you. And I kind of feel like we should have known who that was at that point, Yeah. Because he's sitting there saying, oh, it's you. And we're supposed to be like, who?
Right.
And then we're introduced to this person we've never met. And it's weird. Anyway, point being, that kicked everything off. We had Mrs. Voorhees. Mrs. Voorhees was the killer. That is what that film is known for. Not just kicking off this franchise, but Mrs. Voorhees was the killer. Huge, huge moment. That's what that is. We transition to part 2. She's dead. what do? We are introduced to our new killer, Jason, which does not make any sense, but we're going with it anyway. We're just like, he survived, whatever. And take that as for what you will. And this was a movie, honestly, that I felt like took me a while to appreciate. You know, I think the very first time I watched it, I was like, it's a thing. And it could have been maybe, I think I probably watched it when I was a teenager, for the first time. I know it was one of the last few that I actually saw out of the series because I watched them so out of order. Yeah. But I don't know, I guess because it just felt like we're doing part one again, except Jason. There's just something about it that it wasn't really, I wasn't connecting with it, even though it was just like, okay, well, first appearance of Jason. But over time, I've started to appreciate it more, especially Jenny. She's a great final girl. I love her in that movie, and all the other aspects to it. If you saw the Shout Factory release, they got that extra footage from part two. The gore, was it part two? Yeah, it was part two because that's the guy in the wheelchair. Because I remember that was a big one where he got the axe in the face, and it was just. We didn't get to see all the gushing blood, but somebody recovered a lot of gore that got cut from that movie. So that was
I just have to say, wheelchairs in horror movies are so different.
Yeah,
they just keep going and going. And just to kind of piggyback real quick off something you said about adjusting to part two, that's when we finally started to. I don't want to say you see him killing more. But Mrs. Voorhees was much more hidden when she killed. And I think that aspect changing in the movies from that point, it's kind of an adjustment for people. Mm-hmm. Because Jason gets more and more and more in the frame as the franchise goes on. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it does.
And starting to see him more in the second film after seeing what you see in the first film, because you do see you do see the deaths in part one, but I don't even think they're quite as brutal.
Depends.
There's a few of them that are.
Yeah.
One of my favorite deaths in all of horror movie history is actually in the first film, and it's Kevin Bacon's death.
Yeah.
Getting the arrow shoved up through his neck. Mm. And I'm sorry, but Jason's mom and him, they're both crazy strong. Just going to put that out there. But I think that's why part two might be an adjustment for some people. Maybe just because it kind of changes. Jason's not as hidden about it as Mrs. Voorhees was, if that makes sense.
And I think that's actually a smart way that they went about filming it, because he does become more of a spotlight killer, where you actually get to see everything going down versus, like you said, hiding in shadows, being the POV shot. We don't really get a lot of that from Jason, and it fades out eventually to where we don't get that at all. But with part two, if we're looking for what's the iconic, what's it known for, what's the big moment, it's the sack, the introduction of Jason, the sack Jason, I guess hillbilly-esque living out in a shack with his decapitated mom's head. There's so many elements to it that you can kind of point to, but this is like the introduction of Jason. We're getting to see the first introduction of Killer Jason, so I mean that's an iconic moment in itself.
Yeah.
We never see the sack again, so that in itself has some sort of iconic element to it. Because, let's face it, it's kind of interesting to see that original design. Yeah. We all know, obviously the hockey mask, but the sack, it was the first thing. We're talking like imitating The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and it just, there's something about it. It's creepy in its own way. It may not scream Jason, but it was him. It was the thing. That's how he began.
Yeah.
So that is a big moment for the franchise. That is huge. Go to part three. The hockey mask. Yes. This is where he gets his iconic hockey mask. That is huge. The one thing that Jason is known for. the hockey mask.
Yeah.
It's here. This is where it begins. Save for the movie being in 3D and its funky disco soundtrack, at the beginning and at the end. If you don't remember, I mean, that's just catchy. It's like, what was Harry Manfredini on when he come up with that? Because it's such a departure. You go, woo, woo, and then
that's how Jason gets to people so quickly. When you don't see him on camera, he's discoing to them.
I got to see this now. We got to get somebody dancing in a Jason costume with that music playing in the background. And he's just moving so fast.
Some hikers just walking by, see him move. What is going on? We better get out of here.
So, despite all that, it's a fun movie. And we get to see, there was actually a post. This is a little incentive. Of course, you could probably Google it. But, hey, I'm trying to entice you to go to our Facebook page. Somebody had uncovered some behind-the-scenes pictures, some production stills from Friday the 13th Part 3. I shared them on the Horror Ramblings Facebook page. I thought it would be a lot of fun. You get to see, people, how they were setting up shots. And there was some discussion, and I had forgotten about this. And I'm sure they talked about it in that documentary, the big 8-hour documentary or what have you.
Oh, but yeah.
It was talking about the makeup. Apparently Stan Winston Studios had done a first pass on the face makeup for Jason, and he kind of looked, some said like an orc or something like that from Lord of the Rings. But there's elements to it that they don't look bad. It's just, It doesn't quite look like Jason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it could have really worked in maybe another film, but there was just something about it that looked kind of like Jason, but it wasn't quite Jason. And then when the makeup prosthetics that they put on, I think Richard Brooker was the Jason in this one, when they got his facial features and everything set up and the makeup, it looked like Jason should.
Yeah.
And, another thing we can point out that I probably won't really touch on is how a lot of people will assume you've never seen Jason's face, but you see Jason's face in every single movie, and it's always different. Honestly, well, you do.
I saw an argument about that with all the films. When you look at what Jason looks like without his mask on in every film, it's vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that, and I'm like, well, yeah, it is kind of true. And like I was when I think that, I'm like, yeah, it is true, but it can't be that different. And then you look at all the pictures and you're like, okay, this is a lot more different than I thought it was.
Right. So going from that, and again, big moment, the hockey mask.
Yeah.
Transition to part 4. And this was, it's really funny how you find yourself connected to certain movies over time. When I was younger, this was one of the few that I had. I think I'd actually recorded this off of HBO or Cinemax or something like Cinemax. I remember it was Cinemax. I had like a VHS copy of the first film, but this was the very first one that I kind of had my own copy of, when you could record stuff from VHS off of TV. So I watched part 4 a lot. And come to find out, it's actually pretty popular within the fandom of Friday the 13th. Would have never guessed, but it's a solid movie. I like it. Not only do you get Crispin Glover's dancing to whatever, I feel like it was it was a Guns N' Roses track, I think. Whatever it was, he dances like a fool to this damn music. But that's not what's iconic. It should be. I think what would be the most iconic thing here is, one, Jason dies.
Yeah.
For real, technically. And then 2, we get introduced to one of the biggest protagonists of the franchise, which is Tommy Jarvis.
Yes.
So Tommy Jarvis, if you know the franchise, you know who he is, you know how important he is. He is kind of like the Laurie Strode to Michael Myers in a way. That one person that got away, or the Nancy to Freddy. The person that got away that survived and is always fighting back. That's what Tommy Jarvis represents. He is that person. So here we get our introduction to that character, and he does land the final blow. He kills Jason. So not only are we introduced to another iconic character, but we see the demise of, what's the proper term here? Just regular old, kind of supernatural, but not quite, supernatural Jason.
I would say human Jason.
Okay,
He's,
it just seemed wrong.
Pre-zombie Jason.
Pre-zombie Jason. There we go. and again, iconic, big thing for that franchise.
Yeah.
Bounce to Part 5. This is the one everyone hates.
Not a bad movie though.
It's not. It's not a bad movie. It's definitely directed by a porn director. I can't remember his name. Danny Steineman, maybe. He worked in a lot of porn. It's not hard to fathom when you put that together and you watch the movie. It's like, oh yeah, I see the porn aspect of it. And there's deaths constantly throughout this movie. It's just like nonstop. And you wonder why. You're just like, good God, it's like, what is the killer's deal? Why are they just killing at random? Obviously, it's Jason, or you're thinking, well, yeah, I guess Jason, but damn, he's just on a mission to kill every single person. But when you're also kind of greeted our return to Tommy Jarvis, we're supposed to, I hope there's people understanding spoilers abound.
Yeah.
We are to assume that Tommy is our Jason, which they could have done it. I feel like they really could have pulled that off. And it's not that far-fetched because they're really, really selling it. It was just a certain aspect of it. I think you're undersold on the idea that could be Tommy doing this stuff for a bevy of reasons, but I won't get into it right now. But this film is so known to the franchise because it's the one that does not have Jason. It's the fake Jason, the one that people revile because where's Jason? It's a fake Jason. That's why people remember this movie. That's why it's iconic. It's because of fake Jason, faux Jason, or whatever other term they want to use. I don't remember. So there you go. There's that. Another iconic moment. See, 5 for 5. You tell me if I'm wrong. You argue against this. That's what I want the Ramblers to do, and you could do that too. If you think I'm wrong on this, call me out. Part 6. We get, again, return to Tommy Jarvis. Probably one of everyone, or a unanimous favorite amongst the franchise fans. People say Jason Lives is probably one of their favorites, if not the favorite.
Yeah.
And this is where we are introduced to Zombie Jason.
Yes.
The unkillable machine that, we all know and love. And he's just unstoppable, doing just some of the wildest kills that we've ever seen. Probably
now, was Tommy the one that stabbed him in the chest, or was it the guy that was with him? I can never remember.
Tommy, while he was in the ground, he took the metal post, and just stabbed him because he was going like, you gotta die, and then all that did was turn the pole into a conduit. Because storms, they always happen when you're in a graveyard.
Yeah. You go to any graveyard, it starts storming immediately.
Sure.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah, we all know
But that was Tommy that did that, correct?
Yes. So Tommy is responsible for that.
Yes, and then his friend that was with him is the one that gets stabbed through the chest, and Tommy's like, I'm booking it, I'm leaving.
Well, I think Jason actually punched Horseshack through the chest. It was like...
Does he punch him?
I feel like he
for
does.
some reason, I thought he grabbed the rod and stabbed him.
He may
through
have.
the chest. I can't remember. Tommy's one of those characters. I'm glad they didn't make him the killer.
Mm-hmm.
I like Tommy as a hero.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite heroes in a horror movie. Sorry to interrupt. I was thinking about that. And
no, but I mean the franchise needed a hook like the others did. They needed that survivor that we can all remember and look back to and be like, that's the rival. Because
they even talk about Tommy Jarvis in that Never Hike Alone movie that's on YouTube that I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm. Which I need to watch.
I'm pretty sure the actual actor that played Tommy Jarvis is in it. If I remember
I do believe so. Yeah.
He came and he guest starred. And like he makes a joke to Jason. He's like, "You didn't get me then, you're not going to get me now," and he drives off.
So yeah, Tommy Jarvis is still iconic in this, but this is Zombie Jason. This is where we get that. Plus, if we want to take it a step further, this is the first and only Friday the 13th movie that does not have boobs. Not a lick of nudity in that film.
See, that's I don't know about this now.
I know. It's just it's a shame, but it's a fact. So look at that. 2 iconic moments.
Something about the boobs in Friday the 13th. Something about 80s boobs. I don't know. Maybe it's just Friday the 13th. I don't know.
They're expected, you know?
I mean, and there were some nice ones.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I was so in love with, what's her name from Part 5, Debbie Sue Voorhees, the one that actually directed that 13 Fanboy film. You know, she was the one laying out in the forest after her boyfriend walked away, and she's just laying there, and I'm just like, wow.
There's a in the first one, I'm trying to think if she has a nude scene. It's the girl that gets her throat slit in the beginning. I don't think she had a nude scene.
No.
But she had no bra on. You could clearly tell. But I thought she was like I thought she was super hot for some reason.
Hey.
And then, you know, and then reality hits and you're like, "Oh wait, these people are like, you know."
Fun fact about that scene that I just talked about from Part 5.
Yeah.
Have you heard that song that kind of, I don't want to say it does a parody. It's called A New Beginning, like the title of the film. It's by a guy, Jean Lajole. It's under the pseudonym Wolfie's Just Fine. And
I feel like you've shown me this
before. I probably have. It's almost like a coming of age story about this kid and his friends watching this movie for the first time and not knowing what to expect. And then, oh my God, it's a beautiful song. And it's funny because I could relate because I was like, oh yeah, I remember, you know.
I love that. You and Katrina actually sent me the link to that song.
Yeah.
Listen to it. I do remember that.
I recommend checking that out if you haven't already. It's a wonderful song and a great send up to that scene that I just mentioned about boobs. So 6, we got Zombie Jason and no nudity, which is a shame. 7, okay, 7, this is where I could deconstruct it just a little bit in a way that maybe we hadn't quite thought about. But I'm going to say it's iconic. You could say because it's the very first time he fought someone of equal measure, because Tina, she's psychic, you know, and we actually get to see kind of a fight with Jason.
Yeah.
But I would argue it's iconic because it's the first appearance of Kane Hodder, everyone's favorite Jason. And his 4-movie run, that's huge. Yeah. Everyone associates Kane Hodder with Jason, you know, and he did it more than any other actor. He is Jason for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So this is his moment. This is the movie. This is iconic because it's his first appearance. That's my argument there.
Now, real quick with Kane Hodder, I have to give him a shout out and I have to tell you about this. So for people out there that don't know, and I've talked about the documentary To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. It talks about his life. He is a burn victim. Mm-hmm. He got burned while doing a stunt. He almost died in a hospital months later because the hospital was not equipped to treat burn victims.
Sure.
And he went through all of his treatments and everything without pain medicine because his dad was a veteran and he saw his buddies get addicted to pain pills. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want that to happen. But despite all that, everybody says the one thing that a burn victim does not want to go near is fire, obviously. They asked Kane Hodder if they wanted him to have a stunt double for the scene in Part 7 where she blasts the fire out of the furnace.
Mm-hmm.
And they were expecting him to say, yeah, use a stunt double. But he said, hell no, I don't want to use a stunt double. He said, and you guys should do something that they don't typically do in the movies. They don't typically show, at that point, they didn't typically show the people get caught on fire.
Right.
They would like show a scene and then they would show the person on fire. No problem at all. Kane Hodder had no problem at all. The guy has balls of steel. I'm just going to put that out there. He is a fearless guy. If you haven't watched that documentary, do yourself a favor and find it. It's fantastic. But I had to shout that out because that's one scene that still sticks with me from that movie.
Mm-hmm.
That and when she makes his mask break open and she shoots the nails into his face and he pulls it out and he's real pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say the psychic powers, like you said, and Kane Hodder.
Yeah.
As Jason, definitely.
Yeah. Kane Hodder most definitely needs. That's the iconic. That's the moment. That's the thing that I'm looking for. Is that big thing that you can point to and be like that. That's the big moment. That's the big thing that's important to the franchise. That's what I'm really trying to evoke here. Is these are huge franchise moments. And I don't think other film franchises have as many big iconic moments that you can point to. And it's like, this is that thing that people can point to and defines a franchise. Friday the 13th, in my book, has so many. Each film represents an iconic moment to the franchise, whether you want to believe it or not. Because I'm getting into some very dangerous territory here, and that's part 8. Probably one of the lesser favorites. I think it's probably regarded a little bit more than another one that we're going to get into. But this would be, and this is, it gets a little muddy here. I feel like that people could probably start to argue against me here. But this was not only the last Friday the 13th film, if you think about it, within the original franchise. This was the end of the Friday the 13th films. It's also the very first time we see Jason outside of Camp Crystal Lake. This is the first time we got to see that character somewhere else, because in every film, it's in that area. There's never a moment he goes outside that area. It's always within that general vicinity. Here, he is whisked away to New York, and it's not exactly the big moment we want it to be, because he didn't take Manhattan. You know, there's a lot of implications there. The Muppets took it a hell of a lot bigger than Jason did. So, here we are with that, and just however you feel about it, you have to admit, seeing Jason in Times Square was cool.
Yeah.
You know, he's not in Crystal Lake anymore. He's in New York. He's away. It's big. It's big because from that point on, he never really goes back. I mean, there are moments in those areas, but he travels more. Jason becomes a man of the town. You know what I'm saying? He decides to get out there
a little more cultured.
There you go.
Plus, fantastic scene. Two fantastic scenes that I absolutely love. Punching someone's head off. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And when he breaks the boombox.
Yeah. It's an odd choice for a scene, but it's funny at the same time, And
that god-awful scream.
Yeah.
At the end.
At least they didn't do the original ending where we saw like little Jason in his mouth. I don't know what the hell that was. That was a trip. The movie seems like a bad acid trip at times, especially when we get to New York. But hey, that's New York, right? I mean, who knew they had just barrels of sludge and toxic waste just sitting around the city?
These movies really make it a point to let you know, don't go in the sewers. You might find a bunch of toxic waste.
Right. I mean, man, I never really wanted to go to New York in the 80s because they always made it seem terrible. Just this freakish town. But hey, it could be spot on to the New Yorkers. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much it. So we go to Jason Goes to Hell. And this is where I might lose a little ground on my argument, but I'm going to try to make my case best I can. So this would be iconic in my mind because this is our first non-Friday the 13th film. The first Jason-led film where his name is prominently in the titles. Also, no longer produced by Paramount. We're now over at New Line. So we're in a new company, the house that Freddy built. This is supposed to be the moment. Yeah. Because we even end the film with seeing Freddy's glove, grab his mask, and drag it under. So the implications of that, obviously, are we're going to finally get to see these two square off like we've always wanted to. So there was a lot of change. We still had Kane Hodder, which really helped. But there was this dynamic shift in a Jason film. And we finally got our first unrated Friday the 13th film on home video.
Yeah.
Which we had not seen, which... a shame if we go back to part 7 and we see all that gore footage you got unearthed there and never got into the film because we're just so worried about the children. Won't somebody please think of the children? And we got all that garbage. Don't get me started on that. Anyway, so I would argue that what makes this movie iconic would be that there's a dynamic shift. We're talking new company, new approach to the franchise because we've never seen Jason body hop and we've never heard about the dark magic with the Necronomicon, and I know they don't mention it by name, but I mean it's there. So there was a dynamic shift to what they were trying to do, storytelling, who is Jason going to be here at New Line. A whole regime change that could have really ruined the character or improved upon it, depending on which way you want to look at it, because New Line really didn't do a lot with the character, if you think about it. I mean, hell, Paramount was like nonstop. It was a Friday the 13th machine pumping out movies. And then when they went over to New Line, you're like, okay, well, they'll inject some new blood in it, and they got 3 or 4 movies out of it. Yeah. So it's weird. But that's my argument there. Then we'll go to Jason X, which was a long time. Do you think about that? It was a stretch because that was at least almost 10 years.
God, almost, was it really that long?
No, 10 years. No, yeah, 10 years. Almost 10 years. Because I think Jason Goes to Hell came out in 1993,
1993, and Jason X came out in 2001.
Okay. 2001? Is that right? I felt like it was 2002 because Spider-Man had released, and I went and saw Jason X in theaters the weekend that Spider-Man came out.
I've got a list here of all the Friday the 13th films. 2001's what I have on here.
I feel like that's wrong because I saw
it. Might be. I
know I saw it in theaters the weekend of Spider-Man, and no one was there because everyone was watching Spider-Man. So I took advantage of that.
2002?
Spider-Man came out in 2002. I remember that because 9/11 happened, because I want to bring that up. We always want to talk about 9/11. 9/11 happened, and then if you remember, the Spider-Man trailer had him tying up the criminals. It was like this weird trailer, and they took the spider web in between the 2 towers, and they're like, well, we gotta pull that. We can't show that because helicopters next to the World Trade Center tower. I know we're far removed from it now, 20 years if you can believe that, but it's just so ridiculous to think, like, I'm sitting there watching that going, oh yeah, I'm reminded of this thing because Spider-Man tied up a helicopter in between the 2 towers. Oh my God, I'm going to have trauma. I wasn't there. I don't know. But it's just the knee-jerk reactions that people had. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and you're right, because Spider-Man did come out in 2002.
So I think maybe the production on Jason X was actually done quite some time before.
There's what it was. Production was done in 2001. It came out April 26th, 2002.
See? So it had already been out a week before I went and saw it. And then, anyone that was going to go see it on opening weekend just said, to hell with it, Spider-Man's out. We got to go see Spider-Man. I actually remember buying a ticket for Jason X and saw people waiting in line. And they're just like, we're sold out of Spider-Man. It's like, are you serious? It's like, we're sold out. And it's like, well, I'm going to go take my ticket and go to this theater. And I'm going to sit in here alone, which I did. So Jason X, what would be its iconic moment? Well, I feel like I got something good. So not only would this be the second outing from New Line, which isn't really iconic, not only are we taking Jason away from Crystal Lake and we're putting him in a completely new, area in which other horror icons have explored, space, because I think the Leprechaun had been to space by now. Pinhead had been to space by now. Thank God Freddy never went to space. Of course, that could be fun, but we don't know. Jason is now in space. And you could think, okay, well, yeah, other people have done that. What makes it so iconic? Well, if you think about it, this was the first time we saw a new Jason.
Yeah.
They took the idea and said, okay, well, what if we found a way to update Jason, to make a new Jason?
Yeah.
And they did, in the form of Uber Jason, whether you love or hate that name, whatever. But Uber Jason is not original Jason. It's an entirely new Jason. And so if you continued the franchise from that point on, I feel like it would have to be that Jason. Yeah. This new creation, thanks to these nanobots who reconstructed his body. Why? Because Jason doesn't die. I mean, that's about as simple as they put it. He doesn't die. We also get to see his face again. See, where they pulled the gooey goop off his face. I'm telling you.
And that movie had one of my favorite deaths too, the liquid nitrogen.
That is one of the most iconic deaths in the franchise. I would probably put it up there with the sleeping bag kill as one of the ones that people will remember the most, because that was just, there was no other way you were going to do that, or in another movie. Because I feel like there had to be that discussion at some point. It's like, you know what would be awesome? Liquid nitrogen is smash. How are we going to do that? Space. Let's go to the future.
I honestly think some of these movies, they do they look at all the cool kills they could do, and they're like, we need to change locations. We need to switch this up. We need to switch this up. You just made me think of something. I don't want to say this yet, unless you're. Do you have more to say about Jason X?
No, I think all I could really point to is saying a new Jason. We got a new Jason in Jason X. Makes it iconic. Makes it a huge moment in the franchise. Tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't think I am.
Now, you saying, the nanobots fixing Jason because Jason can't die. That made me think of Freddy versus Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a scene in the very beginning when Freddy is tricking Jason. He says, Jason, do you know what your gift is? And it's, no matter what they do to you, you can't die. You can never die. And I guess Freddy vs. Jason, I guess you could consider it part of the Friday the 13th franchise and part of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
Sure.
And obviously the iconic thing about that is we're having this ultimate battle between these two horror icons.
Yeah. I mean, that to me was my argument for that film, is we are seeing Jason go toe-to-toe with another iconic character. That is huge in its own right. And I don't know if there was something we had talked about here recently, but I'm going to make an argument. Freddy versus Jason, in my opinion, for two franchises that had nothing to do with each other, technically, and that's why I'm trying to isolate like MCU or DC movies. None of that. I'm talking about two completely separate franchises. They decided, bam, let's put them together and let's see what happens. There is not another film that comes close to being as awesome as Freddy vs. Jason. I don't give a shit what anyone says. They nailed that landing.
I will agree with you wholeheartedly on that one.
You look at Alien vs. Predator. You look at Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys, which, God, makes me so mad. You look at all these versus films where they tried to do this, and it never comes close there's always something about it that just seems off, or it just seems weird. Like there was even talk about Hellraiser Halloween crossover. Like I watched a video about it this week where they were just like, well, we got two franchises we could slam together. Let's have Michael Myers and Pinhead face off. And you're like, but why?
Yeah,
it doesn't work. This works.
I think with horror films, especially, it's hard to do these crossovers. And I know, like, there is a crossover of The Ring and The Grudge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about it.
I know
that it exists.
Yeah, I had heard, because when I heard about it too, I was curious. I was like, oh, okay, what would that be like? But in the back of my head, I was like, this is going to be one of those letdowns where there's not really a fight. And sure enough, that's what I heard. The face-off is really in the last 5 minutes of the film, and it's just not a fight or anything that you're really wanting. So it's a letdown. So you've been waiting this entire time. Same with that Demonic Toys Puppet Master garbage from Sci-Fi. You know, same thing.
And I think part of the reason why Freddy vs. Jason works so well, and I'll argue this, another reason why it's kind of iconic for Jason, I think the reason that Freddy vs. Jason works, it's not just a kill fest. Obviously, people die. They each kill people. But in a way, Jason sort of goes from this slasher in that movie to sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like an anti-hero.
In some aspect, yeah.
In a sense. Because he's killing the people that get in his way. Once he finds out that Freddy was using him and he tries to kill Freddy in the dream world and it doesn't work, he's all about killing Freddy. Like, that's what he becomes about.
Yeah.
And the movie has a really... The director, actually, he was not a fan of horror movies, really. He had not ever really seen Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. But they brought him in, and he kind of looked at it like, I'm going to make Freddy the big bad. And Jason's going to be this sort of misunderstood warrior. That was sort of the aspect that he went into it with.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it work because you kind of side with Jason a little bit. You're like, and Jason, needs to kill Freddy.
And it's not that far-fetched either, because when you take a look at Jason's backstory, it is tragic. It sucks what happened to him, because who wants to see a kid drown? It's not like he was some evil kid that, died or whatever. He was a misunderstood boy. He got supposedly drowned in the lake, and then now he is this revenge machine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can pity that. You can sympathize with that. And then Freddy, child killer. It's hard to sympathize. You can like him because he's, goofy and
he's funny and everything
whatever,
else, yeah.
But child killer. And we're talking about a kid who supposedly died coming back to life and killing the child killer. So that's already a fun dynamic.
The thing, too, with Freddy vs. Jason that gets to me, Freddy poses as Jason's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Jason has always listened to his mother, and he keeps killing. She wants, Freddy poses as his mom, says, I need you to go to Elm Street, kill the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Never said to only kill a few, When Jason finally gets knocked out in the film, Freddy again poses as his mom and like bitches at him and is like, I told you to only kill a few, yada, yada, yada. The thing about that sequence, though, that gets to me, and if you go back and you watch it, really pay attention to what Jason does.
Yeah.
Because Jason sees his mom, and then boom, his mom's gone. And he's confused, and then Freddy shows up. So he's instantly thinking, this guy did something to my mother.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he sees his mom disappear and he sees Freddy, he grips his machete even harder. And at this point, it's just he's a mama's boy who lost his mom, and he thinks that Freddy did something to his mom at that point, and we get this fight that ensues. And I don't care what anybody says, the fight scenes in that film,
yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, there was a lot of heavy influence from like Japanese cinema, the gushing blood. I feel like there was a movie that Robert Englund had actually mentioned very specifically. There was a Japanese samurai film, or maybe even a horror film for that matter. And I think it was actually one of Ronnie Yu's films. It was just like fountains of blood just gushing everywhere, and they're watching it saying, this is the guy we got to get.
Well, and I think them using... I think them making the fight scenes the way that they did in the film, showing Freddy hold his own against Jason in the real world, and Freddy, you know, being a really good fighter, actually.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that works because it makes you think of martial arts and things like that. And if you remember in, you know, not the Friday the 13th films, if you remember in the Nightmare on Elm Street films, Freddy has gone up against people that know martial arts before. So who's to say that some of those powers he has in the dream world don't carry over into the real world, and some of those abilities. Obviously, he can't, you know, regenerate a lost limb instantly or anything like that. And, you know, even at the end of the movie, when they've cut off Freddy's head and his body falls in the lake, you know, she goes to the end of the lake, well, the end of the pier, and Jason's body is right there. And obviously, you know, Jason's messed up. He's hurt because Freddy actually was a pretty good fighter.
Mm-hmm.
You about half expected Jason to maybe grab at her or maybe something like that, because Jason's just a killing machine. But by the time it was all said and done, Jason just sinks to the bottom. And to me, Jason in that movie just wants to be left alone. Like that's all. He wants to be at Camp Crystal Lake alone.
Yeah.
And it really makes you, like you said, you kind of sympathize with the character at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't typically happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that kind of stands out to me on the Friday the 13th side of things.
And I don't feel like any of it feels unnatural either. It doesn't feel out of character for them. And there's just something about other films, they twist or they make adjustments to certain aspects of a character, and you lose something. Yeah. Here, the adjustments don't feel off. They feel natural. They feel like, this is absolute. The character is still the character. Even though you're adding an extra layer to them, they still feel like that character that I know and love, and it doesn't feel foreign.
Yeah.
And it's honestly why I feel like this movie works so well. And it works on so many levels and is better than all these other face-off films.
And honestly, I think it was good writing. I think the movie has great pacing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're great about the way that they tell the story, how they explain things for the characters and everything. I didn't feel like it was a cheesy horror movie. And, you know, crossovers can border on the line of cheesy, and when there's a lot of story to tell, it can be a problem. They didn't over-explain things.
No.
And I don't think they under-explained either. I think they wrote it really well.
And the fact that they pulled from the lore of both.
Yes.
I thought that was chef's kiss. The fact that they went back to Weston Hills, they talked about, what was the drug? Hypnosil. The fact that they worked all that stuff in, and it was never a moment where it was just like, well, let's explain part 3 again. It was like, no. You're a fan. You'd be like, oh, that's the thing. But at the same time, they don't, like you said, they don't over-explain everything. It's like, well, we're going to tell you enough of what you need to know. But if you're a hardcore fan, this is an Easter egg for you. And it works into the movie so perfectly.
Well, and the other thing, too, that I think that does, and I've talked about this with you, you know, the script that I worked on, I kind of threw some things in there, and you picked up on it because you're a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when films throw that stuff in, especially Freddy vs. Jason, they did it really well, to the degree that if I take somebody who's not a horror movie fan or, you know, isn't familiar with those films to go see this film, maybe they know the characters, but they don't know all of the movies.
Right.
They can still watch the movie and enjoy the movie because it's given them enough explanation. But then they can look at me and be like, this is kind of interesting. And I can be like, yeah, you should go back and watch the original movies so that you understand this stuff even better than you already do. I think they were perfect at doing that. I think that they made people who maybe haven't watched the movies in a while or have never seen the movies have an interest in going back or going in the first time to see those films.
Right.
I think it's a perfect crossover movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's not another one that I can think of that really that could top it. And we're talking crossover in the sense of not characters that we've like Batman and Superman. Doesn't count because we're talking about two characters that exist within the same universe regardless. We're talking about two characters that never had. I mean, it had to be fate to get them together on screen. And it just worked out for our sake, if you ask me. But now, to end my argument here, because I feel like I've made some really solid arguments here, but we still technically have one more movie. Now, does it count?
I'm trying to. I hate to throw shade, but I have to say this. New Line Cinema is owned by Warner Brothers now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember when Warner Brothers actually completely bought New Line. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I feel like it was somewhere.
I can tell you right now what movie actually put New Line Cinema out of business. The movie that was the final nail in the coffin was The Golden Compass.
Yeah, okay, so that would have been 2008, 2009, somewhere in that general area.
2007.
Okay, so I was within range.
You were close.
I was close.
I like New Line Cinema as a studio.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do some fantastic horror films. I think when they first started doing their horror films, when they first acquired New Line Cinema, I don't know if there were maybe a lot of rewrites done on things or what was going on, because I'm sure that some people from New Line Cinema were not brought over to Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. So there were probably some projects that were part of the way done or whatever. I know you're talking about when they were trying to remake or reboot Friday the 13th with I think that film was 2000, was it 2009?
2009, yeah. Sounds right. Because I think Nightmare came out 2010.
Yes. That's correct. So these movies came out probably right around the time that New Line was being absorbed into Warner Brothers. And when companies are crossing over like this and one is being enveloped by the other, people are getting fired, things are getting changed around.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get the best work. I think they played it safe with this newer Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
I've talked to you about it before because we've talked about remakes that work and don't work. You know where I stand on it. I think we both agreed that one of the unique things about the rebooted Friday the 13th could also be something I guess we could say would be something that stands out for the purpose of this show.
Sure.
They did show a little bit more about how Jason was so easily able to tell where people were,
right?
How he could get to them fast with his underground tunnels and his traps and everything everywhere, which makes sense. That makes sense for pre-zombie Jason because he was probably he lived out in the woods by himself all those years. He was probably a good trapper, a good hunter, probably had all that stuff figured out. But I feel like it was just a rehash. And I didn't like any of the characters, but maybe two of them.
Yeah, it was it was exactly that, a rehash. And ironically enough, written by the same guys that wrote Freddy vs. Jason, you know? So you'd think they'd have a little bit more of a love and appreciation for it. But it's like they just did, like you said, a bare bones, by the numbers version, but trying to combine some elements from the other movies. Because if you look at certain aspects, you could say, well, this is like in part 4, this is like in part 1, here's a little bit of part 2, you know, and you just cramming all that stuff together. And while it is in essence a Friday the 13th movie, I can't argue that at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing about it that made me go, oh my God, that's just, And it's honestly how I feel, and this is going to surprise some people that actually really know me. I think that's how I feel about Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I'm a huge Godzilla fan, if you don't know. But it didn't do anything new enough. You know, you're introducing me to all these iconic monsters I was so excited to see on the big screen. But at the end of the day, I finished it and I'm just like, yeah, but I've seen that. You know, I've seen that movie. So you may have given me all the fancy special effects and all that, but I've seen this movie several times from the Japanese side of it, and I just felt let down. Same here. It was just like, yeah, it's a Friday the 13th movie through and through. You gave me blood, boobs, you know, beasts, but I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen this movie,
and the honestly, the version that came out wasn't better than the original. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I've seen this before, and you guys did like a Wish version of it. Like, this is the great value version of the original. And I think a lot of that, like I said, has to do with the fact that the studios were, you know, the studio was being bought, it was being brought in. There was probably a lot of behind the scenes stuff, probably a lot of producers and, you know, pencil pushers who were like, no, take this out. We have to play the safe game. We'll just do the same formula. That's why the Friday the 13th. That's why the Nightmare on Elm Street remake didn't work. They went a direction they shouldn't have, and there's a lot of scenes in that movie that are complete rip-offs of scenes from the other Nightmare on Elm Street films, and they all just sort of drag together, and they try to outdo. It's like, even with the Friday the 13th remake, they take things that already existed, scenes that have already been done, and they try to go, we're going to do them better than they did. But they missed the point of keep it simple. If you keep it simple with horror films, it works really well.
I would even say to a degree that Friday the 13th actually got right over Nightmare on Elm Street. Is with Nightmare on Elm Street, as you said, they tried to imitate and replicate so many iconic moments, whereas Friday the 13th, you take a look at their kill system in that, there was a lot of really unique new stuff that we'd never seen before.
Yeah,
and I give them a lot of credit for that.
That's one thing that I really liked about the remake. Like, in all fairness, it's not a bad movie. It's not.
It's just, you've seen it.
Yeah, and I wasn't rooting for anybody to live. And the one character that I was rooting for to live died, and her death didn't feel, it felt like shock value. It didn't feel meaningful, and it should have been a meaningful death.
Yeah.
But perfect example, one of my favorite deaths in that whole film is when the guys in the like storage building, and he's running from Jason, and Jason throws the axe, hits him in the back, and the guy falls backward, and it comes up through his chest.
Yeah.
That was just a unique death. They didn't overdo it with CGI or anything, so it worked.
Sure.
You know, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, even the ending scene, it's a ripoff of Freddy vs. Jason. She doesn't have the machete. She has a one of those paper cutter things. They break off the blade, and she's got it, and she says, "Welcome to my world, bitch."
Yeah.
And whoop. She doesn't cut his head off all the way, but she cuts his head basically off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, really? You guys couldn't even come up with an original way to kill him? You had to copy Freddy versus Jason?
Yeah, it's
but I think a lot of that is because the studios, like I said, around that time, they were still kind of getting things in order, sort of replacing everything. I hope they do what they've been talking about doing. It seems like they've gotten the rights stuff figured out with Friday the 13th. I don't know if they're going to go this direction. It would be really cool if they did it. Kane Hodder said he was on board. There are 12. I think there's 12 Friday the 13th films.
Mm-hmm. Depending on if you count Friday the 13th or Freddy versus Jason.
I think they are counting that. Kane Hodder said they should do a 13th Friday the 13th film, and they should make it basically like their final hashing of the original Jason story. He said after that, if they want to reboot it or whatever, go ahead, but they should do this so that it's one final story. And I've been seeing some of the stuff that's been coming out lately, and they're picking characters from old films that like you wouldn't ever expect to give a movie to, and they're making movies. And every time I see that, I'm always like, Steven needs to finish his Pamela Voorhees movie idea, because I think that would be golden.
Sell that to Blumhouse, and I bet you we could make an awesome origin story.
I could see it. No problem at all. On a side note, speaking of movies and everything, my good friend Chad let us know he filled out a thing for a casting call. They are filming the new Blade movie somewhere around. It's several hours away, like 6-7 hours away from here.
Mm-hmm.
But they are looking for extras, and they're paying like $92 an hour.
Well,
so he's looking into that, and I told him, I was like, just remind them that you're a big guy and that you're really strong. They might be able to do something, because big strong guys in Hollywood tend to get places.
Yeah.
I know that's really random, but talking about movies, I had to say that. I hope he gets it, because he's an awesome guy.
Yeah, it would be awesome.
And I wanted to... I don't like shouting myself out. I know that you shouted me out a while back about that Face of Horror competition that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, I am in the top 10. I will probably make it to the top 5. Might even make it further. And the next time you talk to Lace, please tell her thank you for me.
I will.
Because I can see who votes for me, and she actually donated a little money, and she paid for some votes for me.
Oh, wonderful.
So, if any of the Ramblers out there want to make it happen, if you want to send me a vote, it's free, guys. I hate talking about myself. It makes me feel all blech, but
okay, well, I'll do it. Damn it! Everybody, go out and vote. Okay, we share these links all the time. Whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Twitter, wherever you're at, you can vote, and it doesn't take anything. They say you can verify by card. All you got to do is they're not going to charge anything. They're going to charge $1 to your account, and then they're going to take it right back, and then you get it back. It's just a verification thing. It's nothing.
And
nothing.
You
big.
can verify with Facebook too. So
yeah, if you've got Facebook, I know some people don't like Lace. She doesn't have Facebook, so she had to do the whole card business. But it's absolutely free. So takes just a moment of your time. I always try to remember. I have little reminders every 24 hours. Just come back, click. Come back, click.
I appreciate it. I think they have it set up like every 9 hours it refreshes so you can vote. I don't know how true that is. I'm not sure, but I know I'm doing better than I thought I was going to be doing. I will say that, because I have several friends who they have much more horror memorabilia, and they're huge horror fans like I am, and they really broadcast it out there. I have one friend who, I mean, he's one of the biggest people when the conventions go on. He knows any and everybody you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And last I saw, he was like 17th place, and I was like, how am I doing better than you are right now? I'm like, That's crazy.
I think it's just people that vote, and you get the right people. And again, it takes nothing to go vote. So just, the fact that you've stayed in the top 5, I'm really happy because I've been watching that, and I'm just like, I really wish we could get you up on the ranks because you were up top early on, and then other people kind of came in. And I just wish I knew how many votes everybody had, but I know we're not supposed to know.
I know once these groups are over, they're going to take the winners from each group and put them together. And I have a feeling, like you and I have talked before, I'm probably going to have to compete with sex appeal.
Yeah.
And I don't think Freddie and fishnets will work, especially if I do it. I don't think it'll work if I do it.
What's funny though is I've noticed there are a lot of other people, and I'm trying to stay unbiased from it, but a lot of people I know are doing this, and I'm just like, shit.
It's crazy. Yeah.
If I can throw votes to different people in different groups, fantastic. But I've yet to see that, so I'm at least happy about that. You're not competing with anybody I know in a group yet.
I don't want you to feel like, oh man, if I don't vote for them, then
yeah. But I mean, I've already committed to you, so I mean, here we are.
Well, and it is sort of in line with the show because if I win, I get a photo shoot with Kane Hodder, who I don't know how you feel, but Kane Hodder is legitimately my favorite Jason.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
And
you can't
feel bad.
compete.
Yeah, and I feel bad that he didn't get to be in Freddy vs. Jason because they told him that they were going to be filming it. They sent him a script, and he never understood. They never gave him a reason why they didn't bring him on. And it really surprises me because I would have loved to have seen a version of Freddy vs. Jason with him.
Yeah.
Because he's just so much more brutal than who they had.
Mm.
And the gentleman that they had play Jason in Freddy vs. Jason has played Jason before.
Yeah.
And I guess in Jason Takes Manhattan, Kane Hodder said he thinks this is the reason why they didn't hire him. There was a scene that they wanted to do. It's the scene where Jason gets hit by the car. I think it just like clips his leg or something.
Right.
They didn't want Kane Hodder doing that scene. And Kane was like, I'm a stuntman. I can do it. And the guy that they picked for Freddy vs. Jason, they're like, no, we're going to have him stand in and do the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So he's wondering if maybe they thought he just couldn't handle it. And he didn't know why they would do that. Because, Robert Englund, when Freddy vs. Jason came out, Robert Englund was 53.
Yeah.
He was 53, and the scene where Freddy jumps up out of the water, that was Robert Englund. That was not a stuntman. That was Robert Englund doing that scene. And he said by the end of it, they did that scene like, I can't even remember how many times he said, like 7, 8 times, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
The water was cold, he was freezing, and they had to put extra adhesive on the prosthetics he was wearing because he was going to be in water, and he said it was one of the most terrible experiences that he had ever had with it. And in the first movie, he was allergic to some of the stuff that they used, so I can only imagine how awful it would have been.
Yeah.
But, man, now I need to watch Friday the 13th again. We talked about it. My wife does not like Friday the 13th. Like
Poor
at all.
Shame, but all
I know.
right.
She thinks she doesn't understand how Jason, like, she gets mad at Halloween too. She's like, these people are way too tough. And the thing that really pisses her off is how Jason just randomly appears in front of the campers, which I'll agree in the aspect of Jason Takes Manhattan, when the person's running from Jason and they climb up to the crow's nest in the boat and he's up there. I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah. I can agree with that.
I never look at it like that, though. The thing I think people need to understand with horror movies is certain horror movies are just made for the entertainment value. It doesn't have to be a good movie. It doesn't have to be a good movie to be a good movie, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Jason Takes Manhattan is not on my top list, but I still love it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's entertaining.
It is what it is. You can't just... You're either in for it or you're not. That's all I can say. And with a lot of these franchises, if you commit to what it is and you're just like, you know what? Yeah, it's okay. I'm all right with it. You let a lot of stuff go.
Just like I'll say it, and I know people are gonna be like, "Oh God, here he goes talking about it again." Freddy's Dead. Not a very good movie.
I mean, people would have been drunk by now. You've said Freddy. They're playing along at home.
Now, here's a question about that real quick before I say what I'm going to say. Should we change the rule a little bit? Because you've even talked about Freddy and Nightmare on Elm Street today. So maybe whenever we talk about it.
Well, see, I feel like to make it fair, I would have to talk about Friday the 13th since that's my preferred franchise. And then if I talk about Friday the 13th, if I bring it up, then they have to take a shot when I bring that up.
I think that's fair.
That way it kind of mixes it up, and it gets people drunk faster.
Well, if anybody's still conscious right now. But, no, Freddy's Dead is not a very good movie, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
And it has Robert Englund's favorite Freddy Krueger kill of all time.
Which is?
Making the deaf kid's head explode from the chalkboard. That's his favorite kill in all of the films.
Huh.
My two favorites are probably Wanna Suck Face and Turning the Girl into the Cockroach.
Yeah.
So
those are solid. And from the fourth movie, as we've established before, solid entry. Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, we should look into doing this with more movies. It's going to be hard to do it with other movies because I've been thinking about it a lot, and it is true. Like, I think that's what has kept me interested in Friday the 13th all this time, because I used to not be such a fan of just the big hulking slasher guys.
Yeah,
like I found them entertaining, but the only franchise that I really got through, the first franchise I got through was Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the big slasher, the big slashers and the masks go. And then I watched Friday the 13th. But that's the thing about Friday the 13th. I think you hit the nail right on the head. There's something different and major in every film that happens, and I think that keeps the interest.
Right.
So I think you definitely summed that up. Extremely well.
It's the thing that just made the most sense to me is in looking at so many different aspects. There's just a lot of the movies just do not have that particular iconic moment per film. And the more I thought about it, it's the only film franchise I can think of at the moment. There could be others, but it has to be it has to be huge for the franchise. And to me, every moment that I brought up is huge because it does something that no other film before it had done, or brought something to the franchise that had not been seen or it's best known for. Just little details like that. And maybe we can deconstruct other franchises like this, but like you said, we'll look at that if we can figure out another angle, or maybe the same angle. If I can be proven wrong about this, that's where the Ramblers can come in and say, "Oh, I've got one for you," and then point out all the ways I'm wrong.
And I mean, we could even do an episode or two about just major moments in horror films, because there's been some major moments that are just stick with you throughout the whole franchise.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's definitely content there, I think. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish I would have had more to say today. I'm not as familiar with Friday the 13th. I've watched all the films. It's been a while since I've watched them. I'm going to have to go down. I have a DVD collection of them. It's an old DVD collection of them, and I have all of them. I just need to sit down and watch them. I'll have to do that while the wife is at work, because if I put one in, she'll go, "Why are we watching Jason?"
You can sit her down and be like, "Look, I'll explain the fun of this. If you need me to do it, I can do it, because You've got the Freddy aspect. I got the Jason aspect. I can convince people, maybe, possibly.
I'm surprised I got her to. She's gone to the movie theater with me to watch both of the new Halloween films. I told her I would watch a musical with her, and she always says, "Well, you haven't watched one with me yet." Well, put it in the thing, put it in the player, and we'll watch it.
Hey,
and
Little Shop of Horrors, man, you got your in.
I already told her, I was like, we are watching Little Shop of Horrors, because I kid you not, after I told her that, after we got off the phone with you, she was texting her one coworker going, "Did you know that it ended like this?" And her coworker didn't even know.
Now I know.
Her other coworker, his fiance, she was singing parts of the songs from the movies to him and telling him like what she loved about the movie. So I'm sure when he got home and, explained to her about the the play, I'm sure she was like, "That's not how the movie ends."
Yeah.
Oh man. But I don't really have anything else. Do you have anything else about Friday the 13th other than tell the people that haven't watched it that they need to watch it?
Yeah, if you haven't watched Friday the 13th, you need to go watch Friday the 13th. And you know what you can do is you can go to Twitter and add us at Horror Ramblings and let us know how you feel about Friday the 13th. And you can tell us if I'm right or wrong about these observations that I've made. I feel like I have made a pretty solid case against it. And I don't feel like there were any flaws, maybe toward the end, because when the remake kind of came in, it's a little hard to argue, but I'm talking about original franchise only. And then that's my out. That's my loophole. Ha-ha! But if you've got more to say, or if you just want to lay out this big plan of why I was wrong, in detail, then you can send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. And I'll read it out here. I don't have no qualms about it. And if you love social media groups, follow us on that Facebook group. Join our Facebook group, hang out with fellow horror fans like yourself, and we can have this discussion there. You can even find us on Instagram, see an assortment of horror images. You can join us on Discord and join our Horror Ramblers room, and we can discuss horror stuff over there if that's your bag. No one has yet, but hey, we talk about it maybe. If you're feeling generous, want to support the show financially, you can head on over to patreon.com/Pencil and Paper Productions. Chuck and a buck can help this and other shows like it grow. If you want to say nice things about the show, head on over to Apple Podcasts. Leave us that 5-star review. Express yourself, help the show grow, and you can do that very same thing on Spotify if you're so inclined. Even answer our questions and polls that no one ever does either. It's all appreciated when you do it. All you got to do is click buttons. It's just that simple, unless you want to type something, But most importantly, tell your fellow horror fiends to search Horror Ramblings on the preferred podcasting platform. If nothing else, keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.